vampire. Dracula's wife.
While there are some people who may be concerned about the origins of Halloween and its focus on blood, death, horror, and the occult, to millions of youngsters across the nation, it has been adopted as a time to pursue scary fun. It is an opportunity to dress up in ghoulish or fanciful costumes, to engage in the fantasy of being a witch or a vampire, ghost, or devil. Eager trick-or-treaters solicit candy door to door or bob for apples at Halloween parties. Others brave haunted houses and horror movie marathons, while the more daring visit cemeteries at midnight, play with Ouija boards, and hold seances in an effort to contact spirits of the dead.
What you commonly call Halloween, in the occult world they call it Samhain. Now, when you look at the name, it looks as if it's saying Samhain or something like that. No, 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 no. This is properly pronounced in the ancient Gaelic as Samhain. Samhain, according to occult tradition, was the Lord of the Dead. Now, around 900 BC, a very fierce nomadic people came into the areas of what used to be known as Gaul, Saxony, Brittany. We know it now as the British Isle, and of course it eventually went to Scotland, Ireland, and the rest of the surrounding areas. These people were known as the Celts. Now the Celtic people, they were so fierce and so barbaric that twice they held off the famous Roman legion and extracted heavy tribute from Rome itself. They literally held all power from 900 BC to approximately 900 AD in that area. The Celtic Lord of the Dead, Samhain, is just another name, Samhain, for Nimrod. You study all the myths, all the occult myths of Samhain. He is also a stag god. Has horns just like the stag god of the occult world that is so constant. But this particular time of the year, October 29th through the 31st, those 3 days constitute what's known as Samhain. Everyone thinks Halloween is just a one-night thing, October 31st, but it is not. See, in the occult world, this is a 3-day fire festival. It lasts from the 29th through the 31st. During the time when the Druid priest held power in Great Britain, now the Druids held all power. You couldn't get married without their permission. You couldn't hold any type of official title in the clan without their permission. You couldn't even attend any of their religious ceremonies without their permission. They literally held power over all life and death, and you're really going to find out how in this example. During the nights of Samhain, the Druids would gather at these giant megalithic stone circles. One of the most common known stone circle is, of course, Stonehenge. Just about everyone has seen Stonehenge at one time or another, be it in picture or if they were actually there. Now, Stonehenge, as I said, it's a megalithic crop circle. Megalithic crop circle, that's the UFOs. Wrong subject. But we could always get there. This is a megalithic stone circle. It served 3 specific functions. First of all, it was a temple complex. Second of all, it served as an astrological observatory. Third, it served as a place of human sacrifice. Archaeologists have already unearthed underneath Stonehenge over 4,000 human skeletal remains. And that's just Stonehenge. There are hundreds of these throughout the British Isles. This one, believe it or not, is small compared to some of the others. The one in Avebury is over a mile in circumference. This is just a small one. And there's over 4,000 dead human sacrifices underneath it. You multiply that by X amount of hundreds of these stone circles, and I think you'll understand what the Druids were all about and why they were so greatly feared by the common folk.
Halloween, or should I say Halloween, Today we're going to be discussing the pagan origins of Halloween, and we're going to be discussing the truth about this holiday so you can see the whole truth and nothing but the truth today. For many years, we have been conditioned to believe that Halloween is all about trick-or-treating and candy, bobbing for apples, pumpkin carvings and jack-o'-lanterns, skulls, skeletons, druids, bubble, toil, and trouble, as well as honoring the dead, giving homage to the dead, and paying tribute to the dead. But where does this holiday really come from, and why is it celebrated and hallowed today? That and more to come. As you may or may not have known, Halloween has been regarded as a celebration for thousands and thousands of years, only it originates from and traces its origins all the way back to what's known today as Samhain. Now what Samhain is that it's one of the 8 major Celtic holidays, and it's also known as the 8th and final one, and it also marks a final Sabbath. Now it's also known as the Witch's New Year, and it marks the end of the harvest season, halfway between the fall equinox as well as the winter solstice. Samhain is a time to celebrate the dead as well as honor and pay homage to those who have passed on, and paying respects to the elders and their ancestors, to those who have died and passed on to another life. And during this time, many also partake in sacrifices, bonfires, pagan festivals, and dancing too. There is also magic, witchcraft, sorcery, spells, and summoning that is also involved. During this time, a lot of child sacrificing would also occur, in which children were to be sacrificed to animal idols and passed through the fire to be sacrificed so that sacrifices could be made around the same time as Samhain. And this is also known and commonly called Molech worship, which is also practiced in present-day Hollywood, or should I say Hollywood, even to this day. And the reason that you see Halloween being associated and attributed with the nighttime is because it worships and honors the dead, henceforth the graveyards, demons, full moons, bats, owls, ghosts, ghouls, goblins, as well as scary jack-o'-lanterns, which is also where scary stories originate from. And then there's also the Druids, which is the Celtic priests who also celebrate this pagan festival where they would gather together and dance and circle around as you see here and sacrifice to their idols. Let's not forget about the ancient history, because even sources agree, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica 2005 edition, as well as the cultural history of Halloween, National Geographic, Harper's Encyclopedia of Mystical and Paranormal Experience, along with any others, which all say and agree that Halloween, or should I say Halloween, has had and traced its origins all the way back to Samhain. And now we're going to be giving a brief timeline of Halloween, because did you know that nothing new is under the sun when it comes to jack-o'-lanterns and pumpkin decorating? Because even in the ancient African times and Indian times and many other cultures, carving gourds into elaborately decorated lanterns dates back thousands of years to Africa as well as many other places. Not to mention how the ancient Celts also believed that wearing masks would ward off the evil spirits, and this was done between the 800s and the 450 BCs, done thousands of years ago, and that is where you see masks coming in, hence masks being sold today, even in mainstream stores. And then there's also Samhain, which is the festival to celebrate the end of the Gaelic harvest that's typically on October 31st through November 1st, and this comes pre-1st century, so well over 2,000 years ago, and by the 1st century, by AD 43, Romans had conquered much of Celtic territory. 2 Roman festivals were combined with the Celtic celebration of Samhain, Feralia, which is a day in late October when Romans commemorated the passing of the dead, and a day to honor Pomona, who was the Roman goddess of fruit and trees. Not to mention the different bonfires, which also played a major role, where celebrants wore costumes, mostly of skin and animal heads, and danced around the bonfires as early as 1st century AD. And the reason that they would wear these costumes is because these costumes were used as a defense mechanism and a tool to ward and aid off demons and to disguise oneself from the demons, hence costumes being sold and on display at mainstream stores today. And we cannot forget about the monsters, because throughout ancient history, shades meant that the spirit of a dead person resided in the underworld, and this is ancient thought and theory. But the Gaels also believed that the border between this world and the underworld became thin on Samhain because animals and plants were dying. It allowed the dead to reach back through the veil that separated them from the living as of 1st century AD, as well as the common creature known as werewolf, and the original werewolf of classical mythology Lycaon, who was a king of Arcadia who, according to Ovid's Metamorphoses, was turned into a ravenous wolf by Zeus. And as far as jack-o'-lanterns go, here is a brief and quick history. During the ancient times, the Celts would use pumpkins in order to ward out evil demons from getting to them, as well as using them to sacrifice to their many idols. But did you know that it was more than just pumpkins that were used? In ancient Irish folklore, turnips, apples, beets, and other fruits and vegetables were hollowed out in order to ward from the evil and other demonic forces. And what they would do is that they were carved with faces to help light the way for traveling wards and to scare the ghosts away. And in case you're wondering where jack-o'-lantern comes from and why that term is prominently used for pumpkins and many other carvings, during the Celtic sacrifices and the rituals, common stories would also be told, as well as mythical folklore. And one of the stories that was commonly told was the story of Jack, also known as the Jack story, where Jack tricks the devil into agreeing to never collect his soul, hence jack-o'-lantern. Of course, we have trick-or-treating, which is very common and prominent in America today. But what many do not know is that trick-or-treating actually comes from a term known as guising, which is the practice or custom of disguising oneself in fancy dress or often with a mask and visiting people's homes and houses in order to exchange for food and drink, which is what the Celtics have done thousands and thousands of years ago, even to this day, even as we see done today on Halloween night. And as we also mentioned earlier, the costumes that were also worn to impersonate the evil spirits, especially costumes that have black or white in them. And then, of course, we cannot forget about the soul cakes, which were given with crosses on them to represent a soul being freed from purgatory. Or the better question is, was it really? The tradition known as bobbing for apples, which represents fertility and immortality and also has to do with the tree of knowledge. And also back then, girls would do this, and girls specifically would bob their heads for apples as a practice and ritual for divine purpose. With many other pagan customs and cultures and traditions that's commonly associated with Halloween, as well as the abuse and the satanic abuse and rituals as well, because this even says X-Witch reveals the ritual satanic abuse that happens on Halloween night. X-Witch Beth says she used to love Halloween until she connected the dots. So the next time you're thinking about taking your children to go trick-or-treating or even trick-or-treating for yourself, and the next time you think about bobbing for apples or even jack-o'-lanterns, you'll know the real truth and origin behind Halloween, or should I say Halloween.
When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you any one that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord, and because of these abominations the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. Thou shalt be perfect with the Lord thy God.
Some of the aspects of Halloween are ghosts, ghouls, witches, devils, haunted houses, monsters, and what the police call Hell Night. And any police officer or sheriff's officer, deputy, will tell you what Hell Night's all about. So let's look at some of these things. Let's first look at ghosts and ghouls, because what they say is that ghosts are the disembodied apparitions, and they are your dead aunt or uncle or father or mother's spirit that is now coming back and visiting you, or visiting someone in the house. Or it's a spirit that doesn't want to go into the afterlife, and so now they're trapped in this house and they just want to stay there. That's what a ghost is. What really is a ghost? Well, here's a question. If a ghost is an apparition, what they call ectoplasm, and you can't touch it, okay, you can't literally physically reach out and touch it, because you've seen, you know, when they have the apparition, somebody will try to touch something and there's nothing there, it's just air. If you can't touch it, how can they touch you? And you know that there's a scripture in the Bible in 1 Samuel that says that the dead know nothing. So if the dead know nothing, why are you trying to talk to them? Why are you trying to reach out and touch them anyway? You're forbidden to. Another scripture in Hebrews 9:27 says, "And it is appointed unto man once to die, and after this they keep coming back." Or they just roam around the earth. Or their spirit is trapped here. No. But after this, the judgment. There is no roaming around. There is no second chance. Ghosts are what we call familiar spirits. They are demonic spirits that have been around you 24/7, or around the person that you're trying to contact through a Ouija board or going through a seance 24/7. And they know everything about you and about anyone else. And they will communicate back and forth to each other. And that's how they know so much. And that's how they can answer all your questions. And now you think it's that person that you're really trying to contact, because nobody else would know what that spirit was telling you, unless it was really them. Well, trick or treat.
You've been so brave, sweetheart.
Why are you here? All of you.
We never left.
Does it hurt? Dying.
Quicker than falling asleep. You're nearly there, son.
I'm sorry. I never wanted any of you to die for me. And Remus, your son.
Others will tell him what his mother and father died for. One day, he'll understand.
You'll stay with me.
Until the end.
And he won't be able to see you.
No. We're here, you see.
Stay close to me.
Always.
Ghouls. These are beings that are half dead, half alive. We call them zombies. Or people that just had a bad day at the doctor's office. And these things are grotesque, and they feed on human flesh. And again, these are the kind of movies that our young people go to. They get that thrill of watching these things, seeing other people being slaughtered, mutilated. Witchcraft. We look at witchcraft, and sometimes parents tell their kids, oh, honey, that's just something on TV. That's just something out of the Wizard of Oz. You don't really have to worry about that. Or there's a good witch and a bad witch. You always notice in the stories there's a good witch, but then there's a bad witch. Well, the Bible says the only good witch is a dead witch. So, you know, you have to start giving your children the answers that they deserve to have, which is the truth. And witches actually cast spells, and they are primarily, traditionally, and exclusively of the female gender. Very rarely is a male ever allowed into a coven. And these witches will meet, and they will do what is necessary to promote themselves. Whether it's going out and casting a spell on another girl, or going out and casting a spell on an ex-boyfriend that dropped you, those sort of things.
Wingardium Leviosa. Wingardium Leviosa. Wingardium Leviosa. Wingardium Leviosa. Wingardium Leviosa. Lacanum Inflammarium. Petrificus Totalis.
Expelliarmus!
Inverte Status! Rictus Emperor! Seven Sortia!
Volate ascendere!
Ivanaska.
Devils. Devils are fallen angels. They're now no longer angelic status. When they fell from heaven, they lost their angelic authority. They're still able to operate in the spiritual realm, but they can also operate in the physical realm. And they're referred to as devils. Nothing more than fallen angels. Haunted houses. You know, we glorify these things. Sometimes the city puts on a haunted house. Some good organizations, well-meaning organizations, will sponsor what's called a haunted house. And these things bring big bucks in, millions throughout the year, throughout this time of the year. Because people want to get scared. They want to be afraid. And so what they will do will be to go into these houses, and there'll be actors or people that have been given instructions on how to become a monster, and they will dress up like these characters and these ghouls, goblins, and these devils, and these witches, and they will go into these houses, and when you're walking through a room, they'll jump out at you. Or they'll pop up and they'll try to grab onto you. And it's all the element of fear. Because not only will you go through the house, you'll also turn around and you'll go back through it again. Because once you've seen it now you know what to expect, so now you go through it. And what makes a house haunted? Well, first of all, they say it's inhabited by spirits of the dead. In other words, somebody doesn't want to leave the place. In some cases, violent demonic attacks occur. Well, what brings them? What makes a house haunted? Well, several things. An evil deed, a murder, abuse, any kind of abuse. Doesn't have to be physical abuse. It can be verbal abuse. That's why, brothers and sisters, as Christians, we've got to be careful the words we speak in our homes, because we can bring forth curses or blessings. Torture, and because they've been summoned to be there. In other words, somebody opened up a book and called forth a demonic spirit. Just, experimenting. Or they played a Ouija board and they contacted a spirit. Or they played with tarot cards, or they played with crystal balls. Those things will attract demons like a magnet. All those things will. This is Anton Zandor LaVey, the head of the Church of Satan. Look what it says. We think too different. There are those who actually worship Satan and will make a pact, a blood pact with him for fame and fortune or whatever their heart's desire is for a certain amount of time on the earth, and then Satan calls on that contract. We have the wannabes and you have the elite. The wannabes are the kids that dress up in the face paint, like the white paint, put the black lipstick on, the black around their eyes, paint their fingernails black, and they're fascinated with death. They're called goths. And the elite are your doctors, your lawyers, your professionals that are high up, even government officials that are high up there, that are in the position they're in because they've signed a blood pact. Hell Night. Ask yourself this: why do all the idiots come out on Halloween? Literally, I mean, laced candy. When we started hearing about laced candy, people putting PCP in candy, injecting it into candy. Now, who would do that to a child? It's like if your mind is not all there, or you have some kind of mental disability, you can be affected by these things more than anybody else.
This 4-year-old wasn't himself Friday. Non-responsive and seizing, Levelland police say Jaime's mom rushed him to the hospital. The Chavezes had no reason to think Jaime was high.
And the test come back to show that he had methamphetamines in his system.
Sergeant Ricky Galindo responded to the hospital.
I didn't expect to hear this. It was terrifying.
Levelland police learned from Jaime's mom that maybe the meth could have come from candy his older sister got during a school Halloween festival.
Well, the family is most certainly upset, and I would be too, I mean, as a grandparent.
We notified the school district that, possibility that the child may have got some candy that had some meth in it.
Police Chief Tony Cowan says the school district is very concerned.
And they asked the parents to bring the candy back to the school district that all of the kids have got.
The sweet treats parents sent to school are now evidence, waiting to be tested for traces of methamphetamine.
There's vandalism. Police will tell you that there's more vandalism on that night than any other night. I don't know how many mailboxes we've had destroyed by kids going down the street on that night, and they'll take baseball bats and hit the mailboxes and break them off.
It's awful that people vandalize churches and all.
On this crisp, windy fall day, the smell of fresh paint lingers in the air around Glassy Mountain Church Road. This is one of 3 Pickens County churches recently vandalized. Pickens County investigators say teenagers spray painted pentagrams and profanity on the front of the buildings.
Yes, I was very surprised in this neighborhood because it's usually a quiet neighborhood and all, and it's usually very safe around here and all.
Joey Atkins lives near New Life Church of God, another place of worship investigators say the vandals hit.
I thought it was awful here at the church and all that in the neighborhood. I hate things going on in the neighborhood like that.
The third location vandalized was Tabor United Methodist Church. 17-year-old Hannah Ruth Phillips of Easley, 18-year-old David Allen Stevens of 6 Mile, and 3 juveniles are all charged with malicious injury to a place of worship.
No, it ain't funny, no, because I think it's the sin, somebody messing with churches and all, and I believe in the Lord and all that, and I believe that everybody that messes with churches needs to get involved in church and all, and maybe start going to church and try to get their life right with the Lord.
It's a night of vandalism. It's arson, where they set fires to buildings. And there's also deaths. Remember years ago, there was on the college campuses, people were building huge bonfires and in celebration or building in effigy, and they were making these things as high as they would go, and then people were falling off scaffolds or off of platforms and falling into the fire and dying. People participate in strange games and customs of this pagan religion. Some of the things that they participate in is bonfires. These were bonfires built to light the way for the spirits. And they were also used in Druid sacrifices of humans. What they would do would be to put the sacrifice in a wicker basket, and they would hang it over a huge bonfire. And the way that the sacrifice burned told them whether or not they were going to have a good year. The guy in the basket wasn't having a good time, but it told the Druids whether or not they were going to have a good year. Snap apple, this is a game, we call it bobbing for apples, and it was a means of divination, and it was played by boys, young boys, and apples were set afloat in a tub of water, and if you could take your hands behind your back and you could reach down into that water and pull up an apple, that you were assured of the love of your desire. And that's where the bobbing for apples comes from. Divinations, they have runes, casting stones, and scrying, and that's like taking a mirror and painting it black, and if you stand there and look long enough into the mirror, you're supposed to be able to see things. Well, I'm sure if you looked into a black mirror long enough, you start seeing anything, you know. And it was divining of the future, and they would ask it questions concerning marriage, luck, health, and when one's time of death was going to be. Those were popular questions then. Owls, bats, cats, and toads are things you see all over in Halloween. They're creatures that are familiar with Halloween, and they're considered to be what's called witches' familiars, and it's believed that Satan would take the form of one of these animals and aid the witch in divining the future. Jack-o'-lanterns, these are the pumpkins. Remember we talked about it started out as turnips, and then when it was Americanized, it was pulled over to pumpkins. And they started carving grotesque faces in pumpkins. Also called lantern men, hobblangers, or will-o'-wisp. And there were ghostly lights that bobbed along like a lantern in someone's hand, called corpse candles over in England. And they would appear in bogs and things, and people would see these lights and think that they were spirits. And the Celts would carve grotesque faces in turnips to fool evil spirits. Today, not much has changed. We're still doing exactly the same practices. Samhain, the Lord of the Dead, the Night of the Dead, is glorified and promoted in the movie industry. The enemy is real. And we have to learn the hidden things about him. We have to learn how to discern what is evil and what is not. Now, listen to me, we cannot become Christian witch hunters. There is not a demon under every rock or a devil around every corner. But when something is out and out open and they're blatant about it, then it is our responsibility to expose that darkness. But we can't be Christian witch hunters and go looking for the devil in everything. Because see, the trouble is, if you look for the devil in everything, you're going to find him in everything. The enemy is real. It's not something made up. It's not something out of the Wizard of Oz. It's not something in a book. He's real. He exists. And his plot and his plan and his whole agenda is to get rid of God's creation. There are those who worship the devil in the dark side, and they're very dangerous. The Gothic, we talked about, the Gothic movement came about several years ago, and it gave people an opportunity to celebrate death, people that were fascinated with the macabre. Halloween gives people the opportunity to become a part of this strange, weird, and horror-filled world of darkness. Even adults look forward to the night that they can dress up in costume and become somebody or something else. Remember, the whole agenda is to fascinate and lure and captivate into being something other than yourself. What they're actually doing is they're opening themselves up to secret things that are biblically forbidden and should remain sealed. Should never have been opened. But most parents don't see any harm with allowing their kids to dress up and copy these things. They even see it as innocent fun. Blessed Samhain. What you're seeing here is a witch in her cauldron. See the Ouija board, the Wiccan star. They celebrate this night. This is one of their holidays. If Satan had a holiday, this would be it. Why would any child who professes to love Jesus want to dress and look like something that God says he hates? He calls it an abomination. Deuteronomy 18 says that God finds these practices to be an abomination. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. Abomination is something that God detests with his whole heart. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire. That's child sacrifice. Do we still have that? Absolutely. One way we have it is abortion. Or that useth divination. These are tools used for foretelling and seeing into the future. Crystal balls, tarot cards. Or an observer of times. This is stargazing, astrology, divination, supposed influence of the stars and how they work on your life. You know, what sign are you? Or an enchanter, one who hypnotizes and controls through his voice or by music. A lot of bands out there know how to hypnotize kids with the music. Or a witch, one who practices the ancient craft and uses magic spells, potions, and hexes to promote herself. Or a charmer, one that uses objects like jewelry, etc., to cast spells over others and control their minds. Or the Bible says a consulter with familiar spirits, one who has spirit guides, giving them counsel and advice on their affairs and undertakings. Or a wizard like Harry Potter, skilled in the magical arts, one who's able to summon and cast spells. Or a necromancer, one who attempts to summon the dead in order to get information. Remember we said the dead know nothing? Seances, Ouija boards, mirrors, grave calling. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord, and because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. Thou shalt be perfect with the Lord thy God. Ask and it shall be given you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you. These are instructions for blessings, but it's also a warning goes with it. And that is, we've got to be careful whose door we're knocking on. Because if you're knocking on the door of Satan, 99 to 100% chance he's going to be home. And he'll answer. He's ready to answer that door. He's ready to answer on a beck and call. In the book of Proverbs, we find the lifelong fruits of training a child in the way he or she should go. We're able to make this training so strong and deep that our children grow older, they won't depart from it. Train up a child, Proverbs 22:8 says, in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. If that same child is trained in the ways of the world and Satan, chances are they won't depart from that either. Former Beatles member George Harrison understood this. He was a Hindu, and he worshipped a Hindu god called Krishna. And in a Rolling Stones interview, he said this: the main thing is to get the kids, nail you when you're young, and brainwash you. Then they've got you for the rest of your life. And that's true. The lure of the occult is strong. Strong. We cannot get caught up in it. We've got to be very careful that we don't get so fascinated that we're drawn in before we know what happened. The church has got to stop condoning and accepting these beliefs and practices and use the authority it's been given to fight against these things. I've said it before. The church is the only institution on the face of the earth that has the authority to go against the very gates of hell itself. But we're not doing it. We've lost our spiritual muscle. We've lost that authority. We've got to get it back. We've got to realize we're in a war. We're in a mission field, but we're also on a battlefield each and every day of our lives. We've got to put on God's holy armor. We've got to put on the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the helmet of salvation, the shield of faith, and take up the sword of the Spirit. And you say, well, what about the shoes? Well, see, that's up to you. Because once you know the truth, it's your responsibility to take it out. Not keep it in the church, not keep it in Sunday school class, not keep it to yourself, but take it out. Because there's too many out there that are perishing. We've got to take it forth. We've got to take what we know and take it forth. while it's still time. Those who love and serve the Lord Jesus Christ have no business flirting with the kingdom of darkness. None at all. The fight's on. When thou goest to do battle, look what God says. When thou goest to do battle against thine enemies and seest horses and chariots and people, more than thou, be not afraid of them. For the Lord thy God is with thee, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. That's to let you know that greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world. The lines have been drawn. The war's been declared, and it's on. We got to be like lions. We can't be like meat kittens anymore. We got to start roaring the truth. We've got to start making people listen. Jesus is watching over the world to see if we will follow his instructions. Look what he says. Therefore come out from among them and be ye separate. Touch not the unclean thing. And if we do all these things, and if we keep in account what God says and his word, and not stray from some other belief system or let some other system come in and corrupt us, if we can do those things, we can have victory over the darkness.
J for the real worldwide hood star.
No, I've tried and tried. Still I can't get you off my mind. I think about you all the time, girl. I know it's plain to see. Girl, you were meant for me. I could be a dream, and you could be my fantasy, girl.
Butterfly doors, dumb slap, make it real dough, but love don't come with that. It feel like it though till you lose what you got. So let me talk to you till you understand the chat. Let's get to know each other. I'm a CEO, I can meet your father. He'll be proud of you. I'm an ill, I'm on the radio. I really rap, not a cat who just say do. I'm on MTV, you seen from the hood. We got shit poppin'. I've been around the world. Wings up, tacked out, make a smoke twirl. I bring you everywhere I go. You my downest girl.
No, I've tried and tried.